Welcome back. It appears Russia is behind a computer breach that affected the Republican National Committee last week. Bloomberg reports that the hackers were part of a group known as Cozy Bear, which has been linked to Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. Cozy Bear had previously been accused of breaching the Democratic National Committee in 2016 and of carrying out a supply chain cyber attack involving SolarWinds, which infiltrated 9 U.S. government agencies. An RNC spokesperson said one of its technology providers, Synnex, has been infiltrated, but denied that the RNC had been hacked in any way. Meanwhile, President Biden said over the weekend he would know more information about the Kaseya attack by early this week, a separate ransomware attack by Russian hackers, the largest of its kind in history. Joining us now, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. Jen, great to see you. We'll start right there. What does the president plan to do about these hacking attacks?
Well, Mika, as you just said, we have not yet attributed the attack, the ransomware attack that happened over the course of the last few days. But what's important for people to know is that since the president met with President Putin just a few weeks ago, there have been ongoing high-level, expert-level discussions, conversations about cyber, about ransomware. There's another one next week. And the message that these experts are conveying is exactly what the president said to President Putin, which even if there are criminal actors, even if it's not the Russian government that attacks either our critical infrastructure or our country through cyber attacks, we reserve the option to take action if they won't do it on their own. So the president reserves that option. He's meeting with some of his national security experts this morning to get an update, to have a discussion about ransomware, and we'll see what we learn from there.
So, Jen, if in fact this Russian state actor, Cozy Bear, who helped infiltrate the DNC in 2016, is responsible for the RNC hack or the attempted RNC hack, how serious of an action is that by Russia, and what will the president do? What will his response be?
Well, Joe, as you just noted in the opening here, we haven't made that assessment. The RNC put out a statement basically saying that that was not exactly what had happened in their assessment. So we're not quite at that point yet. But I will say, broadly speaking, that the president takes cyber activity, malicious cyber activity on any entity in the United States, whether it's the RNC, whether it's other private sector entities, very seriously. And he did not mince words when he met with President Putin and conveying that would not be acceptable. And even if it was not a state-run entity, even if it's an entity that's a criminal actor in Russia, we reserve the right to take action if they don't take action themselves. So those are all options that the president has at his disposal. But again, he's meeting with his national security team this morning, not about the RNC attack, but about cyber in general and about the ransomware attack over the weekend. He'll get an update, and we'll see where we go from there.
Hey, Jen, it's Sam Stein here. Good to see you this morning. The breaking news this morning is that a reported assassination, not attempt, of the president of Haiti. Has the president been briefed on this? What kind of message does he send to the people of Haiti? And what would the U.S. government do to make sure that there is some semblance of stability on an already pretty shattered island there?
You're right, Sam, and we all woke up, I think all of you did, and we did, to this news this morning, this horrific attack, this tragic attack on the president of Haiti and his wife overnight. We're still gathering information from this end. Of course, we will be helpful in any way to the people of Haiti, to the government of Haiti, if there's an investigation. But we're still assessing right now. We're still gathering information, and the president, of course, will be briefed by his national security team this morning.
All right, that attack, Joe, has been confirmed by NBC News at this point. Casey Hunt has the next question. Casey?
Jen, it's good to see you this morning. I actually want to go back to the RNC hack and the questions around that. And I'm just curious if the Republican National Committee has reached out to the White House, to government authorities, to ask for more information about it.
I just don't have anything else to lay out for you, Casey. Of course, we are here to be a resource, I should say, to any entity, private sector entities, to the RNC and others as needs arise. But the RNC put out a pretty clear statement yesterday, and I don't have any other assessment from here to provide.
All right, let's go to Mike Barnicle for the next question. Mike?
Jen, there's a lot on the president's desk, as everybody knows. Infrastructure is probably occupying half the desk right now. What are the plans for dealing with Dr. No, Mitch McConnell? Because there really are no politics in potholes, but it seems he doesn't want to get anything done. Is the president going to have him down for a sit-down in the White House and drop the hammer on him, or what?
Well, first, Mike, if that's where we're constructive, I'm sure the president would be happy to do that. They've known each other a long time. They disagree on a lot of things, as you just alluded to. I will note, and I'm sure you guys saw this, but for your viewers, yesterday Senator McConnell was in Kentucky out doing an event and basically admitted he didn't support the American Rescue Plan, a plan and package that was going to deliver a lot of money and resources to the people of Kentucky. So this sounds to me a lot like he's going to need to assess, that is Senator McConnell, whether he believes we should rebuild roads and railways and bridges, whether he wants to make sure the people of Kentucky, the people who elected him to represent them, should have access to those resources, should benefit from this bipartisan package the president helped strike. But the door to the Oval Office is open, and he's always happy to have people down here, whether they agree on some things, disagree on others. That's governing. But he's happy to do it, but nothing to predict at this point in time. We'll see.
Yeah, final question, Jen. Have you taken note, has the White House press office taken note of over the past week? Mitch McConnell admitted in the state of Kentucky that of all Democratic presidents, if he had to be stranded on a desert island with one, it would be Joe Biden. He talked about working with President Biden for bipartisan piece of legislation during the Obama administration, talking about being the only Republican at Bo's funeral. Yesterday, he said, hey, I voted against it like you said, but Kentucky's getting twice the amount, and actually seemed to praise the president's willingness to work in a bipartisan way, contrasting that with Democratic leaders on the Hill. Have you all taken note of that? Do you think maybe he's trying to send a signal? What's going on? It's unusual, to say the least.
It is. Of course we took note. Hopefully they're not stranded on a desert island together. I don't know that that seems fun for anybody, but I will say the president has known Senator McConnell for a long time. They disagree on a lot, including the agenda and how to move the country forward. But the president's going to continue to look for ways to work together. No one ever thought that we could come together on a bipartisan agreement just a couple of weeks ago. No one thought they'd ever see the president of the United States standing right outside the front of the White House with Democrats and Republicans and agreeing on something. You know, our muscles have atrophied on bipartisanship and even policymaking in Washington. The president's an optimist. He believes we can get things done. And of course, if Senator McConnell wants to get work done together, he's certainly open to that. We've certainly took note of what he said, and certainly what he said in Kentucky yesterday as well.
All right, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, thank you. Always good to see you. Thanks
Great
very
to talk
much.
with you.